So unless you are independently wealthy or you are someone's dependent, you are most likely paying rent or a mortgage payment where you're living, right? Unless you've already paid off your mortgage for 37 billion years and you're done, you are probably paying rent somewhere or you're making a mortgage payment. And it is actually insane just how much mental, let's say, pressure, frustration, anxiety is tied up in these monthly payments, in these rent payments, in these mortgage payments. This, oh, I gotta make my payment, I gotta make this payment. It's like we are in a world that is very specifically set up to put us in a mental headspace of, I gotta go get the thing, I gotta go run, I gotta go, you know, and it's like, there is just this innate sense of, money is a constructed thing. Money is created by people. The US dollar is created by people. Our systems of money, our systems of transaction, these are human created systems. But then we live in a world where we are living inside of the rat wheel of a human created system, right? Where we're having to make a monthly payment, pay our portion, so that we can literally just lay our head to rest in a place that is our home, our shelter. I think what's also frustrating about this is because how many buildings, apartment complexes, houses across America especially have electricity still and are fully abandoned, right? I don't know if you've seen any of these like decaying Midwest type channels or people that are going into these massive structures or apartment complexes or buildings or homes or neighborhoods full of houses that still have power and still have these things. And yet our entire world is still supposed to be set up to where, nope, it doesn't matter that we have so many houses lying around with power that apparently nobody's paying those power bills, but you got to pay yours. Make sure to pay your power bill, even though there's literally neighborhoods and buildings, streets worth of structures in America where it's just being powered. Because again, power is free, but because money is a human construct. So I think people talk a lot about the matrix, right? What is the matrix? What is, and I think a matrix is just a system, right? A matrix is just a system of doing things. So how does that system work? How does the matrix system work? Well, it is a consent matrix. It is a system in which you, the willing participant, make an active, consensual choice to engage in this system that ultimately is for your detriment and not for your benefit. That's what the matrix is. And there are many matrices, right? There's tons of different matrices. And a really big and important one is these monthly payments for us to have the right to live, right? Think about this. In this supposed wealthy country, the mass majority of people here have to pay some random other guy to simply lay their head to rest in a warm home. And they have to, not only that, but a big part of it is the living with the regular stress of it, right? This has been something that, it's just hard to do. I mean, money is such a foundational element of our society. It's like this base layer spell. And this whole idea that, okay, money defines our reality, and then we have all these bills to pay for everything that we have to do, and we have to go to a job or we have to make money in some way to exist in our great religion of money, right? And it's just, One thing that's interesting to me about mortgages is you'll hear people say like, oh, don't rent, that's just throwing money away, get a mortgage. Like then you can really hold the money. What, bro? What are you saying? I get the idea that, oh, okay, well, if you have the asset, you're putting the money into the asset, then your money is sitting there, it's not going away, but it still is going away. It's not sitting in your bank account. It's sitting in an illiquid asset that you're never going to move on for a very long time, most likely. And not only that, if you have a rent, you might have a 12-month lease, 6-month lease, month to month, something like this. But what's the word I'm looking for? To hold up your end of the bargain, right? Your risk level is pretty small, right? You have a lease, that lease ends in a few months, you're able to make those payments or not or whatever. It's not a big deal in the sense of if you are in a mortgage, what a mortgage is you saying, I consent to pay the bank, which is just a group of other human beings, a monthly payment for decades. You're agreeing to decades of monthly payments. And those people are going to charge me interest on all these monthly payments for my house. That also, and this is the other thing too, all these people who bought houses, you kind of had like people who were able to buy houses in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and onwards. Everybody's like, oh, well, it's the investment and blah, 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 blah. And now a lot of those people are like, oh, well, I made the right call, right? The mortgage was the right investment because now my mortgage is worth 6 times what I paid for it, or I paid $200,000 for this house and now it's worth $490,000 or whatever. And I would say that on paper, on the numbers on the screen, sure, you made the number big, right? Number small then, number big now. 2 thumbs up. But that's not the reality of it. Because while that number has gone up, it's not just property value, it is also inflation. And not only that, the whole setup of what houses cost and what really is the real supply and demand for homes, where we do not actually exist in a system of market rates. We have a set rate based on inflation and the movements of the blah 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 blah. But like, why is it that every apartment complex in the world, or in America, let's say, they have you're going to get a certain regular price range over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. And that always moves and shifts and changes as the economy is moving and shifting and changing. The economy just being how much money they are pumping in at the top versus how much they're pulling back on it. Because again, we don't live in some sort of free market ecosystem. We live in an extremely controlled economy. And that extremely controlled economy uses the backbone of mortgage payments and mortgage holders to sustain a huge portion of this machine that really exists fundamentally to put human beings in states of lower vibration, states of fear, states of anxiety, and states of feeling like they are not worthy to simply exist and be a person and that be enough. They have to engage in a system that is to their detriment. Run on that right wheel. Get that rent check, get that mortgage payment, and then do it all again next month, over and over and over again. And for me, that has been, it's definitely been a source of frustration, because every single month that I pay rent, I am making an active choice of consent. And also, I'm making an active choice of consent in the sense of, because I have not been on a salary, because I've not gotten into that habitual mode of existence, every single time I'm making rent, it's new, right? It's not, oh, I have this set amount every single month that comes from my job, and therefore I just pay my rent and I don't even think about it, which is how they want it, right? What they want you to do is do your job, is have it fully compartmentalized, everything compartmentalized in your world of money, mental slavery, right? Where you have your job, then you have the payments that you have to make, and then you just go to the job without thinking about it, you make the payments without thinking about it, and you just do that, you do that, you do that, you do that. That's the ideal, right? The ideal is turn your brain off entirely and never think about the daily choices that you're making, never think about the monthly choices that you're making, and simply move through the rat wheel pieces. But I have never been that person to do things totally and completely or to do things without thinking about the points in which my consent is asked for decisions, right? Where am I making this choice, right? I made the choice to get a lease. I make the choice to make rent payments, right? That is an active choice that I'm making. And when one is making active choices, they must be considered. Because though I am in a society full of people making their mortgage payments, making their rent payments, hey, I get it. But I'm in that world, but I know it's not how it's supposed to be. And I feel myself, what I think happens is it creates this base level instability, mental instability. So walk with me here, because I want to walk through how money, rent, mortgages, these are spells used to keep us in a state of fear or keep us in a state of anxiety, right? How many of you listening, watching this video, feel the regular monthly pressure of bills? If that's not you, that's great. But the fact that we have a system that has built, not that, some people make some bad decisions and because of that, they're kind of low on money and now they have some fear and anxiety about that. Hey, I get that. I made bad decisions with money many, many a time. So that's all good, and you can take personal responsibility for when you are mismanaging money. However, the system doesn't become good just because you have the money to pay the bill. Right? Let me say that again. The system doesn't become ethical just because you have the money to pay the bill. I think this is where a lot of people have gotten tripped up in America, where it's that kind of sense of, okay, well, if I sit on my pile of cash, I make my payments, nothing else has to be worried about. Nothing else has to be considered. I don't have to analyze the choices I'm making. I don't have to analyze where I'm consenting to things. I can simply go forward. But not having that cash, feeling the need to go and run, to get some, pay this, do this, blah, blah, blah. Okay, great. I just paid my rent again. Now, when do I need to worry about this next, right? How long am I going to give myself to breathe before I inevitably return back to the stress of needing to make another rent payment? But I don't have to live in that stress. But the point is, so money, we live in a matrix that is set up to place money over human beings. We know this. But it's important to remember and see and find where you are consenting. We live in a system set up that puts money over people and that makes it so that you do not have a right to live unless you have a certain amount of fake capital printed for free by weirdos in Europe, right? That's what we're doing. And if you don't run to go get your cash that the debt system people printed for free in Europe, and if you don't run to get their fake money and make your real payment with your real time, effort, and energy, well, then you're not a functioning member of society, and you are a vagabond. If you're not making payments, you're a vagabond. Oh, man. And so that's why money becomes this, especially our money specifically, right? Like the current global financial system of insane debt and unbelievable money printing, where it's just all insane, where we have so much inflation from literally 2020, 2021 up till now. Like that inflation bump that happened there, like that was so, that was the point where I was like, oh, I'm definitely not owning a home in the traditional manner. When that happened, and all these homes doubled in their real estate value, their market value, whatever, or more. Like, maybe doubled is an exaggeration, but you get the point. After that, I was like, well, I guess I'm not buying a house, that's for sure. Maybe I'll have other ways of doing this, but I really despise the fact that our system, our main wealth creation system too, for people in America is buy a house and make payments and pay somebody a ton of interest on this house that's definitely not worth whatever you're paying for it now. In the sense of all these homes are not of high quality. Like they work, they're good, they do the job. I like this place, it does the job. But like even build quality now, it's like, and then people are paying you're paying $1.1 million for the house that's a absolute dumpster fire of a home, and then you're gonna get a loan for that, and then it's like, it's so insane. And so it really comes down to, I have this constant monthly question. I have this constant monthly sense of, when do I stop consenting? And what happens next? Have you heard the story of Diogenes and Alexander the Great? It's a short story about a philosopher named Diogenes and his meeting with Alexander the Great, who was the great conqueror and leader of Macedonia. Diogenes was a philosopher in the same way, in that same sort of world of Aristotle, of Plato, of these sort of people, but Diogenes was not much of a writer. Diogenes was considered the homeless philosopher. Diogenes lived in, they say Diogenes lived in like a big barrel or a big ceramic jar kind of thing. I wonder if he made rent payments. Probably not. But part of his belief, part of his philosophical worldview, and what made him an interesting philosopher, was he wanted to embody and act out his worldview. He did not necessarily want to make writing about it his focus. And because of that, there's not really any writings of Diogenes that have survived that we talk about now. But at the same time, there's a beautiful idea there of embodying one's philosophy. So there's different versions of this story, parable, anecdote of history. I'm going to read this version for you here. Thereupon, many statesmen and philosophers came to Alexander with their congratulations, and he expected that Diogenes also, who was tarrying in Corinth, would do likewise. But since that philosopher took not the slightest notice of Alexander and continued to enjoy his leisure in the suburb Cranion, Alexander went in person to see him, and he found him lying in the sun. Diogenes raised himself up a little when he saw so many people coming towards him, and fixed his eyes upon Alexander. And when that monarch addressed him with greetings and asked if he wanted anything, "Yes," said Diogenes, "stand a little out of my sun." It is said that Alexander was so struck by this, and admired so much the haughtiness and grandeur of the man who had nothing but scorn for him, that he said to his followers, who were laughing and jesting about the philosopher as they went away, "But truly, if I were not Alexander, I wish I were Diogenes." So the meeting of Diogenes and Alexander. Alexander the Great is this great leader, always surrounded by his statesmen and his people, right? These big cultural men are surrounded by people, right? The statesmen, the agents and managers, whatever that time may be. And then so you have these two characters. You have Alexander the great conqueror, the statesman, the man surrounded by people and culture and all of this. And then you have the homeless philosopher who's not even writing about his philosophy that much, but embodying his philosophy, embodying a sense of his life, a way of living, a way of not caring so much about these societal images in the same way. So one day, when Diogenes is laying in the sun, Alexander and his statesmen walk up to him. And he tells Diogenes that he will give him one wish. He can ask anything of Alexander the Great. This great man, this conqueror, with all of this influence and power, Diogenes can ask him for one thing. And Diogenes says, "Yes, stand out of my sun." And Alexander is so struck by the haughtiness and needlessness. You know, he didn't need something from someone else, and that's what is so admirable about this character of Diogenes. And the more and more I go forward, I wonder, was Diogenes making rent payments? I doubt it. I doubt the barrel was that expensive. No, he wasn't. He was embodying a sense of freedom, right? He was embodying his philosophy, and his philosophy was this sense of freedom, and his philosophy was in this sense of not getting caught up in this whole statesman world, right? This whole world of looking for the validation from the main society. And so Alexander, who this powerful monarch, he sees Diogenes and says, "But truly, if I were not Alexander, I wish I were Diogenes." Why? What is he? He's seeing this freedom. Diogenes is in such a place of freedom because Alexander, though his ego is served heavily by all the statesmen and the people and the flatterers and all of this, he is still trapped in that world in the sense that he is bound to the customs and the cultures and the sequences and ways of doing things as a person who wants to be a statesman in this world. versus you have this character of Diogenes that is living this more Buddhic idea. He's living this particular sense of a way of life, a philosophy, a way of living. And he's doing that in a way that is giving him this extreme freedom. And that's what you see with these two characters, right? This is a parable of, you could even say, ego in the soul, of Alexander is attached to his sense of grandeur for who he is. He's attached to his sense of ego. He's attached to his sense of what the people of Greece think of him and see him and how they perceive. But Diogenes' freedom is in not needing any of that, not needing any of that validation at all, right? Not putting any of that validation out there and saying, I need to have this to prove myself. I need to be looked at in this way. I need to operate in this manner so that I can gain this external validation. But Diogenes is showing a way of life of not seeking that external validation, and then also realizing that that external validation comes and finds you when you are in that place of freedom and living in authenticity. Because Alexander the great monarch, comes and finds Diogenes, not the other way around. And what separates Diogenes, what makes him specific, what makes him memorable, is the fact that he's not just like all of the other statesmen and talkers and people that form in line and come and give their flattery. He's doing his own thing. He's operating in his own way. And more I feel that tug of the tug to escape a consent matrix that does not serve me and see what it would really be like to be in that freedom, be in that place of floating human being versus human doing. Being in that place of floating, being in that place of not knowing what's going to happen day to day. Because we don't know, right? We don't know what's going to happen day to day, but we like to create the illusion of control through holding tightly to the systems that were built to enslave us, right? I don't want to feel like I have no control, so because of that, I am going to keep consenting and choosing that which brings me negative emotion, negative energy. It's a very interesting way that we choose to live. And again, this is why it's hard to think in terms of freedom, in terms of faith, in terms of that sense of like, hey, I don't know what's going to happen, and maybe I'm making a choice or looking at things in a way that is massively countercultural, but I'm going to keep moving in that direction because I have faith in God, and I have faith in myself, and I have faith that I am in a meaningful divine universe, not in a place of nihilistic meaninglessness. And so if I was in a place of nihilistic meaninglessness, if I believed that, then I am much more inclined to hold to those things that do not serve me, because I really am alone. If there is no God and there is no meaning, and we are just all happenstance as we move, all of this is just happenstance. We got through all of this through some sort of strange evolutionary timeline. That's what happened. If that's the case, then of course there can be these feelings of, I'm simply just an animal meat sack out here trying to survive, right? It gets you in that survival mindset, that survival matrix. And so then you choose those things that do not serve you because you feel that it's the only thing that you can do, because you don't feel powerful. Because when you realize that God speaks to you directly, then you can realize, and you can have faith in that, and you can believe that, and you can see the truth of that. Then it allows you to move with a greater sense of freedom as far as your fears or your dark side is willing to take you, right? It's this push and pull. And it's also easy to talk about things versus pulling the trigger, doing them, taking the action, making the decision, right? That's what's happening. Debate, decision point. Debate, decision point. Debate, decision point. So I love that short parable of Alexander and Diogenes. I think there's so much truth there. And I think there is so much peace there too. Especially if you are somebody like me that has quite a sizable sense of grandeur, let's say, sense of personal belief, that I try not to get caught up in and have gotten caught up in. But there's for better or for worse, this kind of story even feeds the ego of, you have the freedom to just be truly a human being. And if you are interesting and unique in making those interesting decisions, then the right people will find you. That's what happened here. And you feel the truth of the story. Did this happen exactly? Who knows? Is it just a parable? It could just be a parable. I don't know if it happened exactly. But it doesn't matter if it happened exactly this way or not. It's about the truth of the story. And that's always what it's about. It's always about the truth of the story.